Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Shull. Today I'm joined by Chris Carlson of Syracuse.com to discuss the incredible story of Nathan Knight and why you should be rooting for him on the New York Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. That includes on YouTube. So if you want to become an everydayer on the video side of things, remember to hit that subscribe button and hit that notifications bell so you never, ever miss an episode. And be sure to subscribe on the audio side as well. Speaking of subscriptions, we have a new option. If 5 episodes a week isn't enough for you, you can text us now. Just join our subtext group. All you have to do is hit the link, which is in the episode description, both on the audio side and on the video side. And Alex and I will text you to answer all your Knicks questions, give you initial takes on stuff like Dante DiVincenzo re-signing, our thoughts immediately after games, and maybe even some bonus articles and content. I am really, really excited to start talking to you guys one-on-one. So join us on Subtext. And who would you be talking to? I'm Gavin Shull, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, who has been covering the NBA both in Phoenix and in New York for about 8 years now, which is pretty crazy to say, but very excited to talk with Chris. Nathan Knight, the newest Knick. You might be asking, why are we doing a whole episode on Nathan Knight? Is he even going to play? I think he might. I think he could have a slightly bigger role than people think. And I think most importantly, he is a native New Yorker who has an incredible story. And I just wanted to get it out to more people because the one Chris wrote is really good. And it is going to be linked also in the description of this episode if you want to read the whole thing. But he talks about a whole lot of the stuff right now on Locked On Knicks. As promised, we are joined by Chris Carlson, a reporter and writer at Syracuse.com. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Nathan Knight. I told you over email, but I'll tell you again. I just in doing a little research on him for myself. I found your story on him from a few years ago. Really hit home with me. Thought it was cool. Thought Knicks fans everywhere should know it. So thanks for taking some time to talk about it.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, he's an awesome story, and the type of story that Knicks fans, should be rooting for, right? You're getting that type of guy, the type of guy that you want to have success.
Awesome. All right. So I wanted to start off where it all started off for Nate. Can you tell me a little bit just about his childhood and what it was like for him just growing up in Syracuse?
Yeah. So Syracuse, for folks that don't know, it's we have major sort of poverty issues, segregated poverty. In this area. It's one of the most sort of impoverished by segregation areas in the country. And Nate grew up sort of in the middle of that. He had a young sister. Nate was really young, but he had when he was super young, his sister stabbed to death at a apartment complex. So, family that dealt with those types of issues. But grew up with a mom who was super supportive, a stepfather that was super supportive, and played a bunch of basketball. When he was in high school, he was sort of an overweight kid. Again, right, that type of environment, your diet's not the best, right? You're dealing with some of those issues, but really was a very good basketball player in high school, but was not a star here. Went to prep school because he had great size. He was pretty athletic for his size. Dropped a lot of the weight. Still was not really highly recruited out of prep school until the very end of his prep school experience, when William and Mary offered him earlier than most. And he committed to William and Mary, and he was not going to go through the recruiting process again. He'd made his choice. These were the people that wanted me. I'm going to William and Mary. So for folks that don't know, William and Mary has traditionally been a pretty bad basketball program in the Colonial Athletic Association. It's not a great league, pretty bad team, and not a great league. You don't get many NBA prospects out of that place. But he really worked his butt off to become, one of the best centers in college basketball by the time he was a senior. Maybe a little short for a center, as Knicks fans know,
it's funny. He's listed on ESPN at 6'10", and I think on Basketball Reference at 6'8". So I've just been rolling with 6'9", but
yeah, 6'9" is probably right. If he's playing center, you're playing small, and you probably don't want to do it right. He's a sub, and he can fill in at center. But yeah, you're going a little small.
I want to zoom back with you, Chris, a little bit, because you really drove home in this story, and maybe part of it was just being that environment, but it also like it very, very easy in that type of situation to get really bitter, right? And and have things just kind of snowball and go wrong. And you emphasize very early on, his mom, there was someone named Helen Hudson, who was the co-founders of an organization called Mothers Against Gun Violence. And then Nathan Knight's mom, Jocelyn, eventually joined it after a lot of persistence from Helen. And you kind of drove home that Nate was there with her at every meeting. I mean, can you just tell me a little bit about just his personality as a younger kid? Because he seemed like someone who was forced to grow up very quickly, and understandably, most people would be in that situation, he seemingly handled it incredibly well.
Yeah. If you meet him, he was super mature, and you have to attribute that to that type of experience. I mean, when he was at William and Mary, right, and I didn't do this when I was in college, but he tried to get every ounce out of his education. Helen Hudson is our Common Council president here, and she had a child that was killed in gun violence. So her response to that was to show up at the site of every child in Syracuse who was killed in a gun violence incident, and protest and just bring attention to that issue in Syracuse. And Jocelyn, who was Nate's mom, lived in her neighborhood, and Helen would check up on her and be like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it?" And she, and she just sort of wore down Nate's mom until Jocelyn started doing the same thing. And Nate was there and he saw it. And he didn't talk a lot about his youth to me. I met him for the first time, and it was tough to maybe break through that level of the shell. Yeah. But it was very clear that he was very mature, and that going through that experience had sort of shaped him, and he'd had to deal with some serious things at a very young age, and he dealt with it incredibly well. I mean, right. Like you said, it either breaks you or makes you, and it made him.
Yeah. And you talked about this a little already, but in high school, he was only 5'10" as a freshman. I think there was a quote in there from his high school coach that much less than looking at him as a future D1 guy, it was all right, is he even going to get off JV? Is he going to make the team? What was the process of him turning from that into, as you said, overweight, a guy who might have even been football first, into a legitimate D1 prospect? And then again at prep school, it seemed there were doubters, he was a little overweight, didn't stand out, and his initial viewing from college coaches, and then just seemingly pushed through that and hit another level. All right, guys, when we get back with Chris, I want to talk about what kind of impact Nathan could potentially make on the Knicks, and how he's going to fit, what his strengths are, what some of his weaknesses might be, and how his time developing in college influenced all those factors. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you about our good buddies over at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200. You can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run. All on the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I think when he was in high school, right, he's just sort of just a guy. and not a bad basketball player, but like he's a guard, and he's got like average guard skills for a high school player in Syracuse. So we're not talking about average college guard. We're just talking about average kid,
Sure.
Guard. And then just had a massive growth spurt. So then suddenly he's got, not superstar guard skills, but like guard skills in a very big body that still needed to lose some weight. But, all of a sudden you've got a guy with who's pretty reasonably skilled at 6'8", 6'9". And he was always offensively skilled in college, and sort of the question, but he was a center. So the question was, how good can he be sort of outside of playing center? Because he's not going to be able to play bully ball in the NBA the way that he was able to do for most of his college career.
It was funny. I was just watching a podcast with, obviously it's another level player, but Draymond Green, and he kind of played the same way in high school and like through college, where like he said like one of my idols was like Shaq growing up, and I like took it upon myself to just like bulldoze through people. And he had a scout for the Pistons, like who he knew like through Michigan connections, kind of come up and approach him and say like, "Hey, big guy, like you're not going to play like that in the NBA." Like, and it really, it's this incredible. Like I saw something from Donovan Mitchell on this too, but it's this incredible thing where like there's maybe like, I don't know, like maybe this number is too big, but like 5,000 guys, like theoretically, like every couple of years capable of playing in the NBA. And like almost more than anything else, like sure, some guys just have like 1% of 1% of 1% skill, but it's like self-awareness that separates them. And it seems like that's something that like Nathan like never really lacked throughout his career. And it seemed like you could tell me more about it, but in his time at like William and Mary, like staying all 4 years, like taking advantage of the fact that it's an incredible academic school, like he seemed just like exceptionally self-aware. And then by the time he was a senior, he was one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, I forget what exactly I think it was economics, but he was like very like numbers focused in college. And right, as the NBA has become more into analytics, have become a thing, like, he started to realize that guys my size aren't going to be able to live around the paint in the NBA. So there's like an interesting balance that he had to find with his college coach, right? Because his college coach, the most effective play for him in college was to like be in the paint and score paint buckets, but that wasn't going to be best for Nate's development long term. So they really, his senior year, there was a little bit of like a push pull in terms of like when you're going to do what you need to do and when you're going to do what we need to do. And they had a really honest conversation about that going into his senior year. At least at the time, Nate was like super happy with how it went, with kind of the balance that he found in college in terms of the freedom they gave him to take the occasional 3-point shot, the occasional mid-range jumper versus just sort of putting him underneath the rim and letting him play bully ball.
And on the other end of the floor, because I know he became only the second guy ever to be CAA Player of the Year and CAA Defensive Player of the Year. What made him so great on the defensive end?
So again, like he was really good. I mean, around the paint.
Yeah.
He's blocking shots. He's very big for that league. He's very athletic for that league. He was just a really, really great interior defender. The thing that I don't know, and because I haven't watched him a ton in the NBA, is like how good a defender he is out in space. Because I don't think he got a ton of opportunities to do that in college. And like his body type, he's a big, broad-shouldered guy. So when he's playing like a really tall, athletic 4, like I don't know how that's gonna go. And it could maybe that could be a skill that he's really developed for all I know. I just haven't gotten to see him a bunch in the G League and the NBA. But that would be like my question is when he's going against an athletic 4 who's able to take him outside, how's he going to do? But I mean, he's strong. He'll rebound. He's a little undersized, but I don't think he's going to get shoved around by a center. I think he can hold his own down there. I don't know how we'll be on the perimeter, but I guess you'll find out and you'll have to tell me.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what role he ultimately plays on the Knicks. The reason, like, I mean, one, I just think it's a fantastic story, and he seems like an incredible human being. But two, the reason I wanted to do this is, like, there's a world where he, like, legitimately ends up in a substantial role on the Knicks, because I think their idea going into the season is we're going to try playing small, we're going to try forcing Tibbs' hand, and play some RJ Barrett at power forward, play some Josh Hart at power forward, like get, like, if not more shooting on the floor, more skill and speed on the floor, because they essentially treated Obi Toppin like an oversized guard who could guard power forwards on the other end. But I wonder if Tibbs at some point is going to be like, I really like having big dudes out there. And maybe Jericho Sims is the first guy he goes to. But Nate shot last season a relatively small sample size, but close to 37% from three. So if he can do that, if he can defend a little bit, and from what I've seen, like, his issue in space is mostly just awareness. But to your point, like, you don't have a lot of reps in the NBA, like, that can be a thing that takes some time to develop and takes reps. And it generally takes a lot of time for rookies to get to that point. I guess
he is a smart guy.
Yeah.
In terms of awareness, I think, like, I would bet on him getting the awareness part, whether he's got the foot speed and that sort of thing. I don't know, but.
Right. No. And that's a great question and a great point. But I know you, and this was, you wrote this article, to be clear, like, I believe, like, during his senior year of college or just after his senior year of college. I mean, at that point, were you forecasting that the NBA was a possibility for him? Did you think he'd be a second round pick, or like a guy would eventually go over to Europe? Or like, what did you kind of see in his game at that point?
There was some talk that he'd be a second round pick, sort of, but also with the knowledge that, like, basketball is moving away from that type of guy, and he really knew, like, I'm gonna have to improve my shooting if I want to stay in the NBA. That is a thing that I think I can do. Like, I shoot free throws pretty well, I have those guard skills, but, like, I haven't done it in a long time. And I think to me that's a little bit of why he's intriguing for the Knicks. You mentioned, like, his efficiency from three, like, it was not very good. Like, his, again, small sample size, all of his 3 seasons. But, like, he has gotten better both from inside the arc and from beyond the 3-point line, each of the 3 years he's played. And he knows that. Like that is something we talked about heading out of college. He's like, I need to, like, get better at that. That is what I need to do. And he did it. So, like, again, right, you see where his focus was on improving, and it's happened. So that gives you some optimism that, he continues to grow.
Yeah, and I think you can see the IQ. Like, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, all right, I 3 hours Nathan Knight film, let's do it. But I haven't done that. But I have watched a lot of highlights, and something I noticed is, like, and this is a skill that the Knicks didn't really get to utilize a whole lot from Obi Toppin, but it was something he could do, and something that came in handy when they did use it. Like, on the short roll, like, he threw, like, one pass that really flashed to me, where he just, like, caught it, center came over, he just right away zipped it out to a corner shooter for a 3. Like, was that something that was apparent in his college game, or do you think that's another thing, like, he has taken the time to develop since coming to the league?
He grew it, but I think that's where sort of those guard skills have translated a little bit. Like, he's always been a pretty good passer as a big man.
And I mean, I think you combine that with his hands are clearly really strong. He likes to make contact. He likes to box out. He cleans up really well around the basket. Like, even if he's a guy who plays in 10 games this year for the Knicks, like, you get the feeling he can give them some important minutes. I guess I wanted to finish up on this. Like, you have a quote in there, or it's not a quote, but just something you wrote in there. His parents look forward to the day he'll be around more often. They hope he can be a role model to Syracuse children dealing with similar struggles. You noted, I don't know how real this was, but, like, maybe there was some consideration his senior year to grad transferring to Syracuse. I know that was, or please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that was pre-transfer portal, so he would have had to be a grad transfer. I mean, just a few credits short. But now, belatedly, 4 years later, makes his way back to New York on the Knicks. Like, what do you think it means to him and his family that, like, this journey's kind of come full circle? Like, maybe he didn't get to play at Syracuse like he dreamed of, but he's doing one better on the New York Knicks, gets to come home. And I guess to, like, the point of, like, someone who was, like, forced by tragedy to be very conscientious of like some of the struggles of his community, like, very early in his life, and just from his, like, economic situation very early in life. Like, what do you think that means to him, that, like, I mean, I'm sure he was giving back well before this, but like now there'll be like real proximity there. And the fact that like a lot of kids in Syracuse are going to be watching the Knicks and inevitably be watching him, and someone from there who made it out and is doing incredible things.
Yeah. So it's funny because, you know, he was not a big time recruit. So he just wasn't at Syracuse's level. Those schools were not coming around to see him. But his parents felt some kind of way about the local school not seeing in their son what they thought was there. They were still a little, you know, miffed that Syracuse didn't offer him initially. So I'm sure his mom, who is his biggest supporter and like loves him so much, is really, really like relishing the idea that he's coming back to New York, like as an NBA player. Like that, you know, I'm glad we had this conversation. Like I'm going to text her because I'm sure that she is like just over the moon happy and feeling justified. And, you know, knowing how close they are and how much he cares about his mom, like I would guess that is what he takes pride in. You know, the fact that my mom is so happy right now and she like gets to like feel, you know, that sort of vindication. And just that family deserves it, you know, like they've been through all that, you know, to go through all that and to have parents have that support of, I'm just super happy for them.
Yeah, there's something, I mean, just an incredibly storybook about it. I think that's why I wanted to talk to you, Chris. Like, it just feels like a guy that like I want to root for. I'm sure you're rooting for, and like Knicks fans everywhere should be rooting for, to get an opportunity and to make the most out of it. Real quick, any high expectations for Syracuse basketball this year? I know maybe someone who should be on the Knicks radar, Judah Mintz, potentially top 10 to 15 pick in next year's draft.
Yeah, Judah's really good. I mean, if he develops a shot, like he's going to go there, you know, because he is that dynamic, like a driving guard. But last year you could play off him a little bit, but he was still blowing by guys, right? It was that, you know, I hate comparing guys to NBA guys, right? But he had the Russ Westbrook, just like, it doesn't matter how far you play off me, like I can still get by you, like thing going on. Didn't have the not quite as athletic as Russ, but you know,
it almost reminded me of Drew Holiday a little bit, where they're like everything else was there, and then when the jumper came along, it was like, all right, that's an all NBA player all of a sudden.
So yeah, it's a better comparison. And JJ Starling too. They're gonna have a really backcourt. You know, he was a 5-star guy that went to Notre Dame and transferred back home. So they have two really good guards.
All right, Chris, we'll have to have you back on when we have some Judah Mintz, Nate Knight pick and rolls in our future. But thank you so much for doing this. Before I let you go, because I'm sure there are a ton of people watching who are Syracuse sports fans, can you tell everyone where they can find all your great work?
Yeah, thanks so much. So see Carlson on SU on Twitter. As Gavin mentioned, Syracuse.com. And it's the Syracuse Post-Standard if you are still somehow a print reader and you want that product. But I appreciate you having me.
You know what, man, print hits different. I'm still a fan, but thank you to everyone who tuned in, and we'll talk to you all soon on Locked On Knicks.